Check my energy, I no get time for no enemy. To read paper, to me. Nothing with person never see. I'm on nothing with person never see. Forget till I say fashion. Only soon expect. Take our body edge. I take her to the person. I'm in the answer, yes sir. Then I'm in the answer, yes sir. Respect is reciprocal, even though I know c'est special.
All right, folks. Welcome to our presentation. This session is being recorded today, so you can enjoy that music again, so you can come back and listen. And we encourage you all to please use the Q&A feature that is at the bottom of your screen and send us all of the questions that you may have. There we are, now y'all can see me. Hi, hi. So, welcome to today's presentation. My name is Claudia Martinez. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am the Assistant Director at the Raza Resource Center. And I am here with Tay.
Hey everyone, my name is Tay Richardson. My pronouns are they, them, or L, and I'm the Assistant Director at the Black Resource Center here at UC San Diego. Yes, and welcome to today's program. So what we wanted to do today, you've come to Reckoning the Election, a conversation with Cici Battle, and we wanted to have a conversation about what's going on. Election day is technically next week, right? Knowing that some folks have already voted, some folks are still in the process, some folks are going to show up the day of, and really just talking about everything that's going on with this process, new things that have been coming up, and sort of trying to suss out some confusion, get some real facts out there, get some real thoughts and emotions out there, to try to just have a nice conversation, right? So we brought in Cici Battle, who I have a great relationship with. Hello, Cici. We wanted to just read this bio real quick. So Cici Battle is a social impact strategist, organizer, and facilitator who champions diverse voices in youth leadership and women's movement. Fueled by a lifelong love of travel and her parents' examples of service, she's worked across the globe, developing leaders from the shadows. She's deeply passionate about the civil rights issues of our time and committed to fighting boldly for young people, women, and the underserved wherever she goes. And I can say for a fact that this is true. I've seen it happen in real time. She is dope, and y'all are gonna love this. So I wanted to welcome Cici Battle. Hey.
Yay!
Hey, hello everyone.
Girl, you need to do like a, yeah, that's me. That's me.
That's me. Hello, how are you? So good to see you all. I can't see everyone's faces, but I'm so excited to be here. Excited to be in conversation with you all. Love you, Tay Tay.
We have a handful of questions, but again, as Claudia said, the Q&A is open. Please drop questions that come up. We're gonna go with the flow with this conversation. So the first thing that's just kind of on our minds right now with everything that's been happening is like, can we break down what's going on with the election and the Supreme Court nomination? Now, there was a second part to this too, of what should people be doing to stay engaged and advance the rights of underserved communities? But like, let's start square one. What is happening?
What is happening? Okay, y'all. So we are in the middle of a presidential election, but what's important to note is that, yes, the president and the vice president who run on a ticket, meaning they run together, is on the ballot. There's also tons of other things. You may hear terms like down the ballot. There are other positions on the ballot, which is a thing, you know, that you use to vote. So the top things that you should be looking out for, of course, your president, that's great. But there's also 35 seats of the Senate that are up for re-election, as well as the House is up for re-election again. And also you have tons of state elections, meaning there are some gubernatorial races right now, i.e. your governor, and there's also lots of local elections. So here right now I'm calling in from, and I should have said my pronouns are she, her, hers. I live technically I live in Washington, D.C. Well, some of my stuff is in Washington, D.C., but I really live in South Florida. I'm from Miami, AKA the Miccosukee lands. That is where I vote, right? So here in South Florida, we have county commission seats that are up for elections. We have city seats, municipality seats that are up for elections. Everything from school board, water board, all of that stuff is on the election. So in terms of what's happening is we're really in a space where we're voting for the majority of positions in our communities. And what you see on the news right now is mostly national elections. But what I would challenge you to pay a lot of attention to that folks are not talking about as much is the census and your local elections. So thinking about, you know, the nomination, now the confirmation of the new Justice, Amy Coney Barrett, let's break this down for a second. So if you all will just bear with me, right? I wanna first name that the system is confusing as hell intentionally. So if you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about and I don't understand this, there is nothing wrong with you. It is not your fault. It is an intentional strategy to make sure you don't have access to information so you can't leverage power for your community. So I'm gonna talk about Amy Coney Barrett, but I'm gonna give you a quick breakdown of like, where does this fit and how does this work? Because I know you're amazing. And I know once you have access to this information, it'll all make sense to you, okay? So when we think about the judicial system, there's 3 branches of government on the federal level. So you have Congress, which is made up of the House and the Senate. You have, anybody in the chat wanna let me know? No, just kidding, Congress, okay. You have the executive branch, which is the president, the vice president, and all of his cabinet, his or her or their cabinet. And then you have the judicial branch, right? So the judicial branch is really interesting on the federal level because there are multiple components that folks don't talk about. So most folks are familiar with the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the land, of all of the country. And it's comprised of 9 justices. These 9 justices, for context, y'all, serve lifetime seats. Okay, so you have that, but you also have lower federal courts. There are 870 lower federal courts that also serve lifetime seats. And I know you're like, what the hell? I don't understand what you're talking about. So let me just put it in layman's terms, okay? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, help me understand.
I got you. Let me do it right now, right? So
You
the
see my
Supreme,
face? I'm
I
like, what?
feel you. Listen, it's intentional. You're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay. So the Supreme Court, they hear 1% of all cases. And the cases that they usually hear is something that has to do, that challenges the Constitution. So that's where you hear things, and I'm sure you've heard Roe versus Wade, right? Those big cases like access to abortion, access to healthcare, who's a human and who's not, who has access to certain schools, right? Those big cases that are basically challenging the Constitution, which is why they only see 1% of cases. Other federal cases go to those lower federal courts. So let's talk about how they get here. Because remember, we're talking about the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett, right? So in order for a judge, remember that serves lifetime seats, to get either on the Supreme Court or these lower federal courts, they are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. So remember, I told you those three branches of government, right? So they're appointed. So the current president is Trump, and confirmed by the Senate, right? So what has happened is that Trump, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. So there was a vacancy, because remember, they're lifetime seats. So the only way that there is an opportunity for the president to appoint someone, there has to be a vacancy. And you get a vacancy either by death or by retirement. And I don't know about y'all, I wouldn't be retiring just for fun. You know what I'm saying? Like a lifetime job, like I'm gonna stay in that thing till you roll your girl out. You know what I'm saying? Just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's like, I'm gonna stay there till I'm gonna hold on to this robe, right? So that's what happened. She held on, she passed away. So there was a vacancy. So Trump was able to nominate, and then the Senate, which is currently controlled by the Republican Party, moved to confirm her. So that's what's happening. And the impact of this, and I know you're like, I don't understand. You just told me about voting and the census. Like, I don't understand. This makes no sense. Let's bring it back, right? The reason why this is such a big deal is because remember, there's 9 justices on the Supreme Court. So justices can't technically be partisan. And what that means is they can't technically align with political parties. However, they can subscribe to certain ideologies, right? So judges either can lean liberal or conservative. And you can guess, how that correlates with certain parties, right? You can also
And
guess.
that's where the tricky part is right there, right?
Right? And you can also guess, like, well, if you have the power, think about it, right? Just like y'all had the power to bring someone on to talk about politics. Who are you gonna bring on? Your homegirl, right?
You.
Right? Somebody that aligns, that ain't gonna say nothing that's like not what you want them to say. We have to think the same way about the president who has the power to appoint a judge that serves for life. So the Supreme Court right now is pretty conservative leaning. And that's because in Trump's term alone, he's been able to nominate and get confirmed 3 justices.
Lifetime.
3, which is the most in modern day history. It normally doesn't happen because remember, folks are serving lifetime seats and they holding on to the robes, y'all, and told y'all they holding on, right? So it's a big deal because remember, the Supreme Court hears things that have to do with the Constitution. So when we think about constitutional rights, those are things like free press and, who's a human and who's not.
Mm-hmm.
Who can, you know what I'm saying? So I know that was a long answer, but I hope I was trying to give y'all a little context because this stuff don't make no sense for real. So
that was good. So I really don't know anything about politics, and I say what I'm about to say. I say a lot. I'm not from this country. I was born and raised in Mexico, and I moved to the United States in time for high school.
okay.
They didn't really teach me this stuff because some of the stuff was stuff that you learn like younger, and they were just trying to get me to graduate out of high school. Then I went to college. I didn't take any of these classes. So I feel like I'm back in school right now because you legit told me a lot of stuff that I didn't know about. But one of the things that that I keep hearing a lot.
Tell me what you heard.
It keeps coming up a lot in the debates too. People keep saying about packing the Supreme Court. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Are we packing them somewhere? Are they going somewhere?
Yeah.
Shipping them off. So can you explain to me what that means?
So packing is basically saying that we are going to fill the court with a certain ideology, because remember, there's 9 votes. And the reason historically why there's 9 votes, there historically hasn't always been 9 justices. At some point, I think it was 6, and then it was 7, and it was extended to 9. But the purpose of having this odd number is to be able to break ties, right? So if they're ruling on something, then there has to be a person that swings the court. So when you pack the court, you're packing it so that it don't matter. That whatever ideology which is dominant will be, the precedent. So now what has happened is the courts have been packed. It has happened with the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett. The Supreme Court now is a majority conservative court, period.
Can we expand the court?
Technically, yes, but in order, this is where the nuance goes, right?
You got me excited for a second there.
So what I want to affirm, right? You said, oh, well, like, I'm not from this country. I want to name that. Is there anyone from this country except for the indigenous folks who own this land? Let's name that first. So all of us, there's that. This country is a scam, but that's a whole nother conversation. I'll put a bit in that. But, most of us, have not had access to this information. So it's not like you didn't, because you weren't raised here at certain points. No, because education is a state and then a local issue, there is no regulation on who has access to civics and who doesn't. And I will also say that the folks who learn about this, you're not taught about it in a way that you can actually absorb and understand and connect it to your life. So I just want to say that for anybody who's watching now or who will watch the recording and you're like, this is my first time hearing this, it's not your fault.
It's the same with the propositions, right? Like the propositions
Absolutely.
Worded in such a way that I'm like, if I vote yes, does that mean that I'm for it or against it? Like, I'll never forget Prop 8. I wasn't allowed to vote back then, but I'll never forget that if you voted yes on Prop 8, it meant that you were against LGBT folks having access to marriage, or and I was like, how does that make sense? Like, I have to vote no for them to have, like, it's the same positions.
I'm really glad that you bring this up, because the first step when we're thinking about, first I want to say I'm really excited that you all are having a conversation and not a speech or something that's like inaccessible. We can actually talk about it. Is because this information, if you think about the news channels, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, NPR, this information is presented in such a way that it assumes that you know this information. It assumes you have access to this information. And that's intentional, because when we think about the creation of this country, it was not created with none of us three who I can see, they weren't thinking about it. We weren't here, what you talking about, right? So it was never created to be accessible. So when you say like, okay, I see an amendment, I see something on a ballot and I don't understand, it is intentional. And the first step to us being able to participate is to know that it's not our fault. It's not because we can't understand. It was created intentionally to exclude us. It was created intentionally to include certain folks. And once you understand that, when you get into this rigmarole, you're like, this don't make no sense. It's not me, it's them. You know what I mean?
And I see folks that are commenting in the chat that this is all intentional. And absolutely it is, right? The less informed that we are, the more that folks who do understand or who write these things are able to get away with it, because the information is not trickled down in terms that you and I understand.
Yes, I just remembered I forgot to answer your question about, can you extend the court? Yes. So we're having a conversation, bringing it back. Literally, I just want y'all to know, this is like a conversation that we have offline. Y'all just getting a peek into it, okay? So just excuse us. We're just going to go with the flow here. But yes, we technically can extend the court. What's really important, one of the things I'm really passionate about is educating people about the power of the seat. So I created a framework about a decade ago, it's called passion framing, that helps people to connect the issues, the micro issues that really piss them off, to the power of the seat. So for you, you're just like, well, this is really jacked up. Can we extend the court, right? Can we expand it? Who has the power to control that? It rests in the Senate. The Senate can pass a law that technically can extend the court. If y'all on the Twitter land, when Amy Cohen Barrett was confirmed, AOC said, expand the court. So what she was saying was, y'all need to be out here voting for y'all senators because the Senate has the power to control that. Does that make sense? So yes, we can, but we need to make sure that, again, remember I said voting down ballot, all you hear is this conversation about the president, but the president has the power to control, who serves on the cabinet. So who's in charge of all of those agencies? Yes, if we go to war, if we don't, executive orders, that's great. But most of the things that affect our day-to-day life lies in policy, i.e. legislation, that is controlled by Congress, which is the House and the Senate. The House, we vote for them, MFers, every 2 years, all of them, right? And the Senate, it's a third, right? So every time there's an opportunity to vote, there's an opportunity to gain power. So when I saw you go like this, a third. So this year, 35 are on the ballot, right? And then in 2 years, 34 will be on the ballot. So
there's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. It's always an opportunity to shift things to obtain power for your community. But what happens is, because of the narrative, remember the intentional strategy. If the national narrative is president, 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 all this other stuff is happening. So for instance, you saw national news, Amy Coney Barrett, oh my goodness, Supreme Court. But wasn't nobody talking about Trump has been appointing all of these federal judges on the lower courts. He has appointed more judges on the lower federal courts than any president in modern history, but you haven't heard about that. And they all serve lifetime seats. In the same way, all of this president, vote for your president, vote for your vice president. We're not talking about the Senate. We're not talking about the House. We're not talking about any of our state elections. And that is where the power lies, because the way the system is structured, it's compounding. It's a domino effect. You need one because it controls the other. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, okay. I got scared there for a
second. 25 minutes in and it is this juicy already.
It's juicy, honey.
I'm sweating. I'm like, what?
There's so much that was just in that. And I'm like, there's so much coming in the chat too with folks like, yeah, no, I didn't know this, or like, it's intentional that this information is being withheld. Absolutely acknowledging that and trying to combat that, right? Like, you're going to hold this information from me, I'm going to get it anyway. Before I go to that next question, someone did ask on this topic of, can you impeach justices, and on what basis?
Technically, you can impeach justices, but it's a very long process. So you need a damn near a majority of Congress to impeach a justice. I think it's been done once in history. So the answer to everything is always yes. It's like, can you do this? Technically, yes. But the process to getting there is like, will this happen? So for example, people are like, well, can you change the Constitution? Technically, yes. But you need a majority of Congress to do it. You know what I mean? So yes, you can. But when we think about precedent, it's very difficult to do, but it can be done. So I don't want to know.
But impeachment doesn't always mean removal either, correct?
Because I thought you said you didn't know about politics, sis.
No. I learned that when someone got impeached this year, and I was like, oh, that's not how that works. I thought I was getting ready to pack someone's bags.
No, because the impeachment process, remember, there's two chambers. So there technically needs to be an agreement for a final thing to happen. So even with legislation, it can pass in the House. If it doesn't pass in the Senate, it doesn't pass, right? So you need, this is what I said, it's a domino effect. These things are compounding. You can't just think about one and forget the other. You need to leverage all of them. at the same damn time. You know what I'm saying?
Whew.
I just want to name, I'm real loose, y'all. It is 8 o'clock my time. So I know y'all are on the West Coast. So y'all gonna have to get into these happy hour vibes, okay?
I'm ready. This next question is funny to me because someone asked this question and I didn't know what it meant.
Okay.
So I just thought people were calling names, but it was, can you describe the lame duck period or what that is? And then what power does the president have during the lame duck period? So I thought they were just calling the president a lame duck. And I was like,
no, it's an actual.
And then I Googled it and I got myself together.
Yeah. So the lame duck period. So remember, there's an election on November 3rd, right? And there is a gap between election and inauguration, which happens January. I forget the exact date. It's like January 20 something, 20th. Yes.
20th, my birthday. Thank you.
Oh, it's okay. Hello. Hello, President.
Every time.
So that period, that gap is called lame duck, right? So I confirmed this with my homegirl, right? We did some Googling. My homegirl is a political science, aficionado who's actually sitting right across from here. Her name is Kanasha Paul. Hi, Kanasha, how are you? And we talked about it right before this. And the thing that we should know is there's precedent, right? Like what it usually happens and what the rules say. Technically, the president still has the same power during that period. Historically, the precedent is that the president just chillaxes. It's like, I done lost. So let me go ahead and chill here. Go ahead and pack up the White House and whatnot, because I got to be ready to move out in January. Now, what I would caution us is if we look around, has precedence been followed? That is the question that I would ask you all. Has precedent been followed? Some could argue yes, some could argue no. I would argue no. So my answer is, what powers does the president have? Technically the same powers. Usually people chill out because they're about to move out the White House. I don't know if that will be the case because it's up to the person to follow precedents or not.
Yeah, these are, as folks like to say, unprecedented times.
I'm just leaving that there because this is a C3 conversation. I am not here to tell you all, who to vote for, what party. That is not the jam. I'm just here to tell you the facts.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're just putting out there what's happening, what it can mean, and how it can impact certain communities. And that's the conversation we're having tonight.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This is a really good conversation. I have so many thoughts. That was my I feel like I'm learning way more in the last 30 minutes than I ever did in school.
I got you, Pam. This is what we're here for. But to your point, but when we think about intentionality, folks who are in power, folks who have had access to this information, this is how they learn about it. Through conversations at their dinner table, with their cousins, because it's something that's passed on. Power is passed. Information is passed. Access is passed. So yeah, of course you're gonna feel like you learn because we're in community. We're talking, we have a little cheese man, you know what I mean? We're hanging out, of course, because we're communicating in a shared language. Power is a shared language, right? The privileged have a shared language. We don't. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah. It is important for us to think, oh, it's intentional that we don't understand this. How can we be strategic and build it on our own? And we do that by doing what you all have done such a great job in doing, and just saying, let's have a conversation. I wish we would have everybody have a cocktail or a mocktail, but that's a whole nother, next time. But you know what I mean? So it's intentional.
Yeah. No, for sure. And you know what this reminds me of? And it's something that I've learned throughout the years. This I did learn in my race and ethnic studies class, and that is suppression, right? This moment right now reminds me exactly of that, of all of the efforts that are being made to ensure that our folks are uninformed and they are unable to figure out how to vote. And so sometimes folks are not even aware that voter suppression efforts are happening around them. What are some ways that they can point them out or be like, ooh, that sounds or looks suspicious? Usually if it sounds or looks suspicious, that's because it is, right?
Listen, okay, this is the easiest way to understand voter suppression. America says it's a democracy. Tay, can you Google the definition of a democracy for us, please? Please Google, because I know you have a whole double screen, and I know you are the number one for the read. Okay, Tay will find and be like, that is incorrect. Let me check this. Please fact check us.
Okay, so dictionary, democracy, a system of government by a whole population or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected representatives. Ooh, elected representatives.
Oh, okay. All, right?
By a democracy.
Oh, all the people, right? So the question is, if you want to identify voter suppression, if there is anything that's put in place so that all the people can't participate, it's suppression. Lack of education is suppression. Let's name that. Voter ID laws, that's suppression. Lack of polling places, that's suppression. You changing the rules like, oh, we can't have early voting, that's suppression. There's anything that blocks the ability for anybody and everybody to participate in this is suppression. I just saw an article on the Instagrams, because you know everybody be on the Instagrams or whatever. Follow your girl on the Instagram. But nonetheless, there was a woman who was 102 years old that took a bus 300 miles to vote. The question is, why is it so difficult if the critical function of a democracy is that all people can participate? So there are so many different ways. So you have scare tactics, you have fear tactics, you have laws, all of this, but the core is anything that gets in the way of every single person who is eligible to vote, even eligibility, and that's a whole, I can get real deep into that. But nonetheless, it's suppression in itself. The question I always ask is like, how can I, when I was in college, don't tell nobody, how can I buy liquor with my college ID, but I can't vote with my college ID? How can I use my college ID to get into a club, to turn up and pay money to support capitalism, but I can't vote? Make that make sense.
Can't do it.
You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
So people try to make it seem all theoretical, like, oh, no, anything that gets in the way, anything, all of those things. Why?
Yeah,
Why? My question is, think about registering to vote. Why do I have to register? What do you mean?
every time too.
What are you talking about? Why do I have to do that?
Yeah.
Here, why am I not just register and I can just pop up? What you talking about?
Right.
That is suppression. Why are there rules to register?
Right. And
why is there a cutoff to register? What? Think about it.
I didn't know. I mean, I checked and I voted a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't know that you had to keep checking over and over to make sure that you're still registered, because sometimes for reasons that I don't fully understand, they clean up the lists of who's registered. And I'm like,
it's called voter purging.
Spring cleaning is important and all.
Oh yeah.
Not one of those things you want to be cleaning up like that.
So let's put it in. So y'all don't purge me off your scam emails, right? But you purge me off the voter rolls. Make that make sense.
Yes.
People, I'm like, how do you have my number? Like, you don't purge your contact. Like, you know what I mean? Like, really?
Those robocalls.
You know what I mean? Like, make that make sense. So when we think about suppression again, like anything that gets in the way of people having access to participate in something that is for them is suppression.
And what can folks do if they see something in their community happening, disabling them or other folks from voting? Because sometimes you know that it's happening, but you don't know what you're legally allowed to do or what.
That's a great question. And again, it always goes back to the power of the seat. Any problem that you're having, any issue that you're pissed about, it's someone's job to fix it. And what we have to do is understand the power of the seat to be able to hold that seat accountable, right? So the supervisor of elections is the person, right? The Secretary of State is the person that usually controls elections statewide, and then you have a supervisor elections that's usually for your county or municipality. Those are the folks who regulate where polling sites are. A polling site is where you vote or not, what time those polling sites are open, why or why not. Can you, do absentee ballots or not? That's usually done by your state. So the question is, look in your state and who controls elections. What you can do, why you don't call them up? When's the last time, have you ever called your supervisor election and be like, Brenda, that's here in Broward.
You know her name.
Question. So why do we only have 4 polling sites, ma'am? And keep in mind, we vote for our supervisors of elections. So if you have a problem, if you don't like how things are going, I'm a little gangster, you know what I'm saying? Tay said that I was an organizer. It's real. We used to roll up at people's houses. I'm not saying do that, okay? We're a bit much, but, lobby them, go to where their offices are, call them, hold them accountable. And another option is take that seat. Or take it.
Get involved.
It's involved, yes. The minimum is involvement. That's the minimum. Because we can't expect people who don't have us in mind to protect us. That's the minimum. But what I'm saying, run for it, is when you understand the power of the seat, all of us could be elected officials. Y'all run centers. Y'all can't, you telling me you can't run a little itty bitty city? What do you mean? You know what I'm saying? Like seriously, we've been socialized to think that so many of these roles are inaccessible because we don't understand the functions. But when you understand the power of the seat, a lot of us have skills that are critical for the function of our communities. And if we understand that, we can run for it, take it. Be the supervisor. I know how to tell people, no, don't do that, do this, do that, do this, do this, that. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's on here that understands intersectionality and understand marginalized identities and how to make things accessible. Why can't you be the supervisor of elections?
I mean, that's some truth right there. I feel like
y'all heard it.
Do something.
I'm just questions that need answers.
Yes.
Just saying.
Y'all heard it. Get out there. Take some seats. Oh my gosh. I have a question that's going to lean us more to talk about a bit of voter apathy, but I did want to touch on a question that was in the chat because I know we didn't talk about it and it can be kind of important. So it was, can you share about the Electoral College and vote certification? So I'm like, definitely want to touch on that before we steer in this other direction.
Oh, the Electoral College. Okay. So I assume that y'all don't know what the Electoral College is. So first, I'm going to say the Electoral College is comprised of electors. Electors, each state gets a certain number of electors that is contingent upon the population of the state. The population of the state is counted by the census. So depending on how many people are in your state directly correlates with how many electors you have, which is why you hear people say, oh, we got to win Texas, we got to win California, we got to win Florida, we got to win whatever. Those are the places that have the most electors because the win number for the presidency is 270. So when you understand the Electoral College, again, history is very important. They were not thinking about most of us, okay? So it was about how do we make sure that power is centered on white, educated, land-owning men, okay? And that was the reason or the justification for the creation of the Electoral College. And the Electoral College's job is to vote for the president, which is why you see things like, you hear, oh, the current president didn't win the popular vote, but they won the election. So when we think about 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but Trump won the election because he won 270 of votes of the Electoral College. So how do I feel about the Electoral College? I know that y'all are like, ooh, that doesn't seem right. That's a whole nother conversation that I would love for us to have. Hit me on the Twitters. If you want to know how I feel about the Electoral College, hit me on the Twitters. The top line is, I think that the Electoral College should be disbanded. I think that if we have an office that is the federal office, that person should be elected by the popular vote. Because in fact, if a democracy is that every vote counts, I think that should be, how, a winner is selected by the majority. So there are folks who, there's tons of different perspectives on it. But for me, I think that the popular vote should be, key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was watching a live Facebook Live today with Brittany Cooper. And yes, amazing, brilliant. And it was talking about like past elections. And I think, was it like the last 4 elections? Like 2 of them were, they just were screw the popular vote and we're just gonna go whatever we want to do.
Yep.
I'm looking back and I'm like, wait a minute. That first election out of that 4, I wasn't voting, but I remember being in like elementary school, doing my little, like, I'm voting for this person. I'm like, so they've been messing with me since elementary school with this electoral college. But something to think about, y'all, right? Like, this is directly impacting things. And like, we think that we are like, this is it. Like, everyone's voting for this person. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
And that's not really true. And I think that's why this conversation is important. So we can really start to know the nitty gritty and all of these little things that touch on each other. And as you said, build on each other. But getting to kind of like the video I was watching earlier, talking a little bit about voter apathy. So many voters believe that the US political system is too broken to solve via electoral politics. What would you say to voters?
Oh, is it? Okay. So I'm going to say something that is not your average politico wouldn't say. And I would say that to say, I sit in the reality of we need to operate within to change and we need to imagine for something bigger. So my favorite author of the whole wide world, in the whole wide world, is Adrienne Marie Brown. And she said, we are living in someone else's imagination. Right? We are literally, everything that we experience was someone else's imagination. And when we think about us operating in this system, we have to, right now, we're forced to operate in someone else's imagination. And I think, not either or, and I think we can try to build our own. So first, for people who are like, the political system is broken, there's no reason, I want to just affirm, I understand that, and that reality is valid. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, that's not true, you shouldn't feel that way. No, that is a valid feeling. As a Black person, specifically, I can only speak from my experience in this country, knowing that this system was never created for me and has intentionally been crafted at the expense of me, who would I to say like, your apathy or distrust of the system is invalid? It is valid. And what I know for sure is that there is an opportunity for us to leverage our collective power to, align with harm reduction, to make sure that it is not going to continue to be at the expense of us while we are building something with our old imagination. So the short story is, yes, I affirm that, I see that, but it is important to understand that voting in itself is an act of harm reduction, because every single election, folks are using it to obtain power. And if they're obtaining power, they're taking it from you. So am I going to give you more opportunity to take power away from me and my community? No, I'm going to protect mine and do this other stuff. I'm going to protect mine and do this. I think we need to shift from an either or and implore an and.
I like that. And that shift of no, like you're not gonna take all the power too. Like we can two truths can exist at the same time. Yeah. Like this is a system that is broken and I'm not gonna let you make it even more broken at the same time.
Well, I should say that I don't necessarily think it's broken. It's working exactly how the way it was built. I can't say, but the sentiment is like, it's jacked up, it's beyond repair. Yes, it is jacked up. Not broken.
So yeah, I mean, well, and even that, right? Like, let's sit with that for a second. Like, it is operating in the way in which it was intended to operate.
Brilliantly. Yo.
It's not necessarily working to the advantage of some.
I would say most, honestly, most. It's when we think about the 1%, the people who are frolicking, it's like You know what I'm saying? Like all of these people like, oh my God, I can't believe you want to raise taxes for people above 400,000. I don't know nobody making above 400,000. I don't know about you.
Same.
I don't got it.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
those people are, it's like this many people who are really frolicking out here. You know, I would say the system isn't working for the majority of folks. It's just, we don't have access to information to really be able to pinpoint the true enemy.
For sure. I know that we're running out of time, and this is my personal question to you, because of the pandemic, voting this year looks a little bit different, right? Like at least in the state of California, everybody was able to vote by mail, and we're all flooding USPS, and if you're able to drop it off, everybody knows all of this. But the reality of the thing is that this also impacts come Tuesday night in 5 days, and 5 days is election day. Usually on Tuesday night, we know who took the seat. We expect this year, how do we navigate this next couple of weeks, honestly?
How do we navigate?
I know that's a super loaded question.
I'm like, how does one answer that? I was going to give a really radical answer, but we're being recorded, so we're not going to do that. How do we navigate? I would say for folks who are like, what should we do? You need to organize your people and make sure that they voted. And I say vote early. So for folks who, you know, election day, November 3rd, should be like last resort. Last resort. If you can, do it now. You know, if you all, like say for instance, if folks have, you know, absentee ballots and maybe they don't have time to physically go drop it off, offer to drop off folks' ballots. You know what I mean? Make sure it's signed, make sure you know where to drop it off and do that. I think that the only thing that we can do is organize our people. I can't predict, I have no idea. And if anybody tells you they know, they lying to you. And I'm not gonna lie to you because we're family, right? Like I have no idea what to expect November 3rd and beyond. I can't even see that far. I'm clawing myself to November 3rd. So I would just say, organize your people. You know, have you asked your cousins and your lovers and your sisters and your mothers, have they voted? Have you asked them? Have you said, hey, like, do you need help? Do you need help filling out your ballot? Do you need help like researching candidates? One of the reasons I made sure I was down here is I wanted to physically put my little thing in the box, okay? I didn't trust the mail. I wanted to make sure my thing was delivered, okay? And make sure that my mom's was as well. So I think what we need to be focusing on is control what we can control. And what we can control is organizing our people.
Yeah, and I know that you don't have like some magic crystal ball, but I was hoping you did know. I'm just kidding. I'm totally.
I really want to though.
And I know that Tay shared this yesterday, and then I shared it on my social media about the USPS is getting flooded with regular mail on top of all of this, that we're in the last few days where if folks are able to take their ballots directly to the drop-off locations or to the polls, go ahead and do it. Rideshare companies are offering discounts. And so quick Google search will give you that information if your city applies into those discounts and whatnot. But definitely for sure, because you can definitely mail it, but we're getting to the last.
We are skinning our teeth right now.
Yeah.
I did want to, there's one last question.
Yeah.
That just came in, and I think it's really important. Do you have any recommendations for self-preservation tips for our communities come election day? And I guess now it's like election days, week.
Y'all trying to get me caught up. Hit me on the Twitter with that, you know, hit me on the Twitter and I can tell you how.
That's the after hours.
That's the after hours chat. Self-preservation. I can tell you how I find joy in these moments is I remember my ancestors and and for me, that's really important because as a Black person who was born in this country, who was forcibly brought to this country, I just remember all that my ancestors endured and thrived in spite of. So for me, that joy comes in like understanding my legacy, understanding my lineage, and really centering myself of like, I have all that I need internally to survive. And also building with my people, you know what I mean? Like finding joy when and wherever I can in community, which is why I said my homegirl Kanasha's right here and, you know, listening to me say all the things. I would say hold your people tight, you know, be in communication with them, be in conversation with them. Do not, I would say my self-preservation is not to watch the news every 2 seconds like I normally do. My self-preservation is to really say, how am I going to find joy and be intentional about that? Because we are in the middle of racial reckonings across the world. We are in the middle of a global pandemic. There's an economic downturn. There's fires. There's hurricane. Like there's so many things happening right now. And it's important for us that even in the midst of all of these things that we can't control, to do our best to control our joy. So that would be my advice. Control your joy, fam.
I really do appreciate that. And
Yeah.
yes, anything that we can do, something we didn't get to tonight was talking about how undocumented communities can stay engaged as well. And I think that
Hit me on the Twitter.
yeah, definitely. Like, so
It's right. I'm like, it's right
Cici
there.
has consented to make herself available to y'all. This the at the Cici Battle for Twitter and Instagram. This is her website. But there are absolutely ways for undocumented communities and community members to stay engaged during this time. And let's keep this conversation going. This is just a snippet. We have a journey to go on. This is the beginning. So thank you all for coming out today. Thank you for joining us in conversation and in community. Again, my name is Tay Richardson, they, them, L, Assistant Director for the Black Resource Center.
Claudia Martinez, she, her, hers. Ella, Assistant Director at the Raza Resource Center. And we want to invite folks to, sorry, truck. The truck running by. We on next Wednesday between the hours of 1 and 5 Pacific Standard Time. There's a post-election community space hosted by the Campus Community Centers and Programs, which is also the folks who are hosting this space right now. Come in, join us for a chat. Let us know how you're doing. I just want to point out, it is not meant to be a counseling session, but we will have CAPS folks available if you need to chit chat with someone. And email me at raza.ucsd.edu if you need any accommodations. And we thank you all. We definitely thank you, Cici, so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Tay. Bring me back. Listen, happy again. Thank y'all so much for coming.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us tonight. See you later.
Stop recording.